There is a question that quietly lives in the hearts of many believers. It is a question people rarely ask out loud, but it often appears during the hardest moments of life. When prayers seem unanswered, when pain lasts longer than expected, and when life feels confusing, people begin to wonder something deeply personal. If God truly loves us, why does He sometimes feel silent? Why do our prayers sometimes feel like they disappear into the air? Why do we search for guidance but feel like heaven is quiet? The Bible does not ignore this struggle. In fact, one of the most powerful stories in Scripture begins with a man who faced this exact experience. His name was Job, and his story reveals something profound about faith, suffering, and the silence of God. Because sometimes what feels like silence is actually part of a much bigger story that we can not yet see. The Bible introduces Job as a man who lived with deep faith and integrity. He was not a careless person or someone who ignored God. Instead, Scripture describes him as a man who was blameless and upright, someone who respected God and tried to live a righteous life. Job had a large family, a peaceful home, and great wealth. His land was filled with livestock, his household was prosperous, and his reputation in the community was strong. People respected him not only because of his success, but also because of his character. He was the kind of person many people would admire and say, "This is someone who truly follows God." From the outside, Job's life looked secure. Everything seemed stable and blessed. But the story of Job reminds us that life can change quickly, even for those who are faithful. Sometimes the strongest faith is tested in ways no one expects. One day, a series of disasters struck Job's life almost all at once. A messenger arrived with terrible news. Raiders had stolen his livestock and killed his servants. Before that messenger could even finish speaking, another arrived with more devastating news. Fire had fallen from the sky and destroyed more of his animals. Then another messenger came, and another. Each one brought worse news than the last. In a single day, Job lost nearly everything he owned. His wealth, his security, and even his children were suddenly gone. The home that once echoed with laughter became silent. No explanation was given. No warning came before the tragedy. One moment life was normal, and the next moment everything had collapsed. For anyone experiencing such loss, the natural question would rise: God, why is this happening? As if the loss of his family and possessions were not enough, Job soon faced another painful trial. His health suddenly failed. Painful sores covered his body from head to toe. His physical suffering became so intense that he could barely find relief. The once respected and prosperous man now sat in ashes outside the city, scraping his wounds with broken pottery. People who once admired him now avoided him. His life had changed completely. In that moment, Job did what many people in suffering do. He searched for understanding. He cried out to God, hoping for an explanation or some sign that heaven was listening. But at first, there was only silence. For many believers, this part of Job's story feels painfully familiar. When suffering appears and answers do not come quickly, faith can begin to feel heavy. Eventually, 3 of Job's friends came to visit him. At first, they simply sat with him in silence, sharing his grief. But soon, they began to speak, and their words only made the situation more painful. They believed suffering always had a simple explanation in their minds. If someone experienced tragedy, it must mean that person had sinned or done something wrong. So they began accusing Job. They suggested that he must have secretly offended God. They told him that if he would only confess his hidden sins, everything might return to normal. But Job knew something they did not. He knew he had not done anything to deserve such extreme punishment. This created an even deeper struggle in his heart. Not only was he suffering, but people around him misunderstood his pain. Sometimes, when life becomes difficult, even well-meaning, people offer explanations that are not true. For many chapters in the book of Job, the conversation continues. Job speaks, His friends respond, and the tension grows. But one thing remains noticeable throughout this part of the story. God remains silent. Job continues to seek answers. In one moment, he expresses deep sorrow. In another moment, he boldly declares his faith that God still sees him. This mixture of pain and trust reveals something very human about faith. True faith is not always calm and confident. Sometimes it wrestles with questions, struggles with confusion, and waits for clarity. Job's story shows that even faithful people can experience long seasons where God's voice seems distant, yet the silence does not mean God has abandoned them. After many chapters of silence, something remarkable finally happens. God speaks, but instead of explaining every reason behind Job's suffering, God begins asking questions about the wonders of creation. He speaks about the foundations of the earth, the movement of the stars, the mysteries of the oceans, and the power within nature. Through these questions, Job slowly realizes something important. The world is far more complex than human understanding. God's wisdom reaches far beyond what any person can fully comprehend. In that moment, Job recognizes that even without complete answers, he can still trust the character of God. Faith sometimes means trusting God's wisdom even when life does not make sense. In the final part of the story, God restores Job's life in a remarkable way. His health returns, his family grows again, and his blessings are renewed. But the greatest lesson of the story is not simply about restoration. It is about the journey of faith that happens in the middle of suffering. Job's experience shows that God's silence does not mean his absence. Sometimes God is working in ways that human eyes cannot yet see. The story reminds believers that faith is not built only during moments of blessing. Often it grows strongest during seasons of waiting, questioning, and trusting. And for many people today, that message offers hope, because the silence they feel may not be the end of their story either.